Our next speaker is Richard Haynes. He's a resource engineer and he's one of the founders of eTool. Anyone heard of eTool? Great. And this is a company, the company's initiative is life cycle assessment software. Okay, the software was rated one of the best in the world to quantify and lower the environmental impacts of buildings through design. Today it has 600 registered users. Richard was a speaker at Perth Green Drinks in 2010. Welcome, Richard.
Thanks very much, especially to Green Drinks for having me. It's an honour, and particularly from the point of view of celebration. I guess I never look at myself as inspirational, I don't think, but then if I thought about preparing for this talk, and I thought perhaps if I'd seen myself speaking in 5 years, how would I make it sound? Or if 5 years ago, if I'd looked at myself speaking tonight, how would it be inspirational? So I've tried to do that tonight and really give it a human element. But also, I don't think I'd be here if Wilma hadn't put me on the stage 3 years ago, so thanks very much, Wilma. And I think some of what we're talking about here is pretty similar. So I'm going to go rewind 34 years. This is me in the little one there. I grew up on a farm. That's my little brother, and I was in a family of 4. I played a lot of Lego when I was a kid, and I spent a lot of time outdoors. Probably most of my time outdoors. Most of my time was outdoors when it wasn't raining, and I guess I really diverged from that lifestyle, I guess, through high school and university, and I ended up at university. Maybe the engineering came from my Lego playing or something, I'm not sure, but I ended up doing mining engineering. I know now that I quite nicely get introduced as a resource engineer. That's a nice way of saying mining engineer, I think, to a Green Drinks crowd. Anyway, I saw firsthand what our lifestyle depends on, and literally at Tom Price, I was working in an iron ore mine at Tom Price when I left uni. Every day we were blowing up huge amounts of Mother Earth and shipping it to halfway around the world to be produced or turned into steel, and then it came back. And from the moment I woke up in the morning with the alarm clock to, having my breakfast, which I was eating with a steel spoon, and the cereal that I was eating was harvested and manufactured with steel products. I was relying on this lifestyle 100%, and I thought it would have been really rich to have given my job up based on ethical grounds because of the mining, when I relied on steel, for every moment of my life. However, I did get a bit less disillusioned, and it took me on some pretty crazy adventures. This is in Patagonia, and most of these adventures involved mountains, which was, really, really, really awesome and really awe-inspiring. And then one day I came across this frozen lake in Canada, and it used to be a glacier, and on the map that I was navigating with, this is, I was on I think a 7-day trip through the mountains. We didn't see anybody for 7 days. It was quite wild. And on the map, this place was a glacier, and in the middle of that photo there, you can see a block of ice that's, in summer that'll be floating in the glacier, or the next summer that would have been floating in the lake. And I was a little bit struck by this block of ice, and I thought, well, that's probably going to melt next summer, and who knows how old that ice is in that glacier. It started back up the valley, and this glacier, I mean, those smaller hills you can see on the right-hand side, the glacier on my map was over and above those. So standing on this level of this this lake 40 years ago, you would have been under 100 metres of ice at least. So it really got me thinking. Around the same time, my dad gave me this Christmas present. It was an iPod manufactured in China, and he said, "You better come home and get a job." So I came home, and there was a few jobs and spurts, but I'll talk a little bit about. I want to talk about carbon emissions, and basically that was what was causing largely this glacier to melt, and I did a lot of research about that because I really wanted to believe that it wasn't the case, and I read both sides of the argument, and realistically there was no way that I could deny that carbon change was real. And so, I mean, even NASA was saying in 1978 that this is the biggest problem facing mankind, and it's taken us so long to really get any traction. We are starting to get there now, but it is a bit slow. When you look at that problem in more detail, and we look at CO2 per capita, so let's look at it on a personal detail. Around the world, around the whole world at the moment, we're averaging around about 6. Australia's up at around about 28, and where we need to be is at the moment is probably around about 2 for the globe to sustain its ecosystems, and that's sort of no extra temperature rise. But our population is going to go from about 6 billion to 9 billion, which means we'll probably have to bring it in around 1 tonne per person or a little bit under to be sustainable, and probably take a little bit out of the atmosphere ideally. So how do we get there? Just on the population side of things, if you don't believe the world's going to stabilise at 9 billion, check out gapminder.org, another tech talk. It's a fantastic resource for all kinds of stats. So what causes the global green, or our personal greenhouse gas emissions? You've got direct fuel consumption, so that's your maybe your gas that you're burning for cooking or heating at home, or your fuel in your car that you're actually burning fossil fuels and you're emitting carbon emissions. But there's also indirect emissions from, say, electricity production. You don't necessarily see that combustion, you don't see the smoke out of the tailpipe, so to speak, but it's happening by your demand in electricity. But then there's this other element that is sort of invisible, and it's in our products, and it's quite often called embodied energy or embodied emissions, embodied carbon. And so an example of that would be the meat that we buy kind of starts its life at the farm as grain, actually. And even before that, it's the steel that's harvested the grain, and before that, you go right back to the first caveman ever burning any fossil fuels. But anyway, the grain gets transported to the feedlot. The cattle get fed by the grain, they get slaughtered, they get taken in a refrigerated truck to a supermarket, and it sits in the refrigerator until it gets sold, and then it's cooked. There's even marketing emissions, so all those people that are selling the meat are actually sitting in an office using electricity, etc. So there's all these embodied emissions, and it's every single product that we use has this same. Not as intensive as meat, or some more intensive, but it has this profile. So how do I actually take responsibility for that myself and reduce that down to that sustainable level? Well, there's a couple of ways you can calculate it. I'd like to promote GHG calculator. You can download this onto any PC, any Windows-based machine, and it'll probably take you about 20 minutes to get a rough idea of your carbon profile. This was put together by a guy called Ben Rose, fantastic guy, and he's an inspiration to me and probably most people that he meets. I did the calculations on GHG calculator, but I wanted to verify that, so I looked at another source, which was the Balancing Act. This was put together by CSIRO and Sydney University. And for every dollar that you spend in the economy, you get, it tells you what the carbon emissions are associated with that expenditure. So I basically plugged all these numbers into a spreadsheet, and I won't go into the details, but what ended up happening is I got a full life cycle, I guess, result on a year, or a full carbon footprint for me for a year of living. And the results when I originally did this, and I presented something similar when I first spoke to Green Drinks, it was actually dominated by embodied emissions, not the things that we typically associate with, say, the carbon tax, like energy prices or fuel prices. So, in fact, energy was pretty negligible. Fuel was reasonable. I think there's 7 tonnes wrapped up in fuel, motor vehicles and transport. But some of that was public transport. But a lot of it was groceries, etc. So basically, if you look at it percentage-wise, embodied emissions was like 67% of my emissions, which was a bit crazy. I didn't expect that. No worries, I've really got to fly through this. So if you look at that compared to, say, individual countries' greenhouse gas emissions, I'm way, way up there, and maybe the way I've calculated this using the embodied emissions is a little bit more detailed and a little bit more comprehensive. But I've got a long way to go before I'm sustainable. In the meantime, I'm offsetting. So in preparation for this talk, I purchased a year's worth of carbon offsets, which was pretty hefty. 2% of my annual expenditure when I look at it. But anyway, so back to the job. It was this sort of approach to things that led me to eTool. And it turns out that about 35% of the emissions relating to buildings are embodied. I just want to talk quickly about the logo. This is where Dad comes back into the story. He since last speaking at Green Drinks, he passed away, and so I do have to just give him credit for the eTool logo. That was its humble beginnings, and there's a more recent photo of Dad. Anyway, so we looked at it and we said, okay, well, do we pitch this at big buildings and try and reduce the carbon emissions of big buildings, or do we look at individual small buildings? And we turned out, when we did the calculations, it's much better to focus on the small buildings. There's many more of them, and furthermore, if you can make it affordable for small buildings, then it's obviously affordable for big buildings. So that's what we did. We ended up producing a tool that's free to use. It's online. You can go and use it yourself. A non-commercial game. It's very easy for us to maintain. Being cloud-based, we have a central database. So if any governments want to look at, average energy or operational, life cycle carbon emissions or energy or whatever for buildings, they can do that. And it's been pretty successful. We're not retiring or anything with the income from eTool. We've got a lot of work to do, but we're pretty certain that this ambitious, business model is going to be successful, which we're really happy about. There's some pretty neat reports that are generated from eTool. I'll just flick through this because I've got to finish. And also financially, we're finding that sustainable buildings are actually really cost effective in life cycle terms. So in this particular case, the payback is around about 8 or 9 years on a really sustainable building. And I think this building was life cycle net zero. So pretty fantastic result to save money and save the environment. Where we're moving with eTool is we're going to have multi-indicator analysis, so you'll know also not just carbon emissions but toxicity and water use and land use, etc. For your buildings. And now the shameless plug, if anybody's interested in low carbon buildings, then please get in touch. We'll help you out regardless of the budget. But I guess right back to the start of the presentation, and this is my new son Hugo and I in the forest down at Margs, and the thing that led me to this, or to speaking here tonight, was really all this time that I've spent in nature, right from the word go, but particularly in the couple of years before I came back to Perth and got a job. And I just really encourage everybody to get out there, and if that's the first step, it's the best step, and I think it's a critical step to respecting nature you know, and that will create the motivation to do the right thing by Mother Earth, basically. So yeah, that if there's one message that I leave you with, make sure you get out into the bush and drag your friends and family with you. Thanks.